Alright, I'm going to show you guys step by step how to make the bases I posted up last week, the scenic jungle bases or wetlands bases. And I got started on these already, just the first step, because this stuff is so messy I wouldn't be able to use the camera or anything. But what you're seeing here on the base is drywall paste, spackle, Drydex. I strongly recommend using the kind that's pink to start, because when it turns white, you'll know that it's fully dry. The white one, you can never tell if it's fully dry until you start touching it, and then you start warping your base if it's not fully dry. And what I've done is I got some hollow bases from Secret Weapon Minis. I filled the base with the putty, and then I carved out the areas where I wanted the water to be. You can see that. I also pushed in some pieces of tan bark here that I'll paint up as rocks later. They come out looking really nice as rocks. And then these are my dune crawler bases, so you can actually see I've pushed in some footprints in various places. And I'll be painting those in and making those look like disturbed earth and mud, like the dune crawler's been stomping around. And after you put the putty into the base, it's obvious just a blob there, so you gotta pack it in as best you can, but I take popsicle sticks and just drag them across the surface to give it a nice flat surface, and then I'll turn around and use them to scrape out the areas I need. Don't worry about making it super neat or clean looking. You can see I just got like extra bit of putty everywhere here and on the sides. Don't worry about that. When this is fully dry, you're going to go and lightly sand this, give it a more uniform look, and this stuff will actually help it to look more natural anyway. So obviously it's jungle, wetlands, mud, dirt. It's not going to look all perfect, clean, and neat. And as for the edges, you just lightly sand that right off. It'll come off very easily. And the next step we're going to be doing is, after we sand this, we're going to prime it, and then we're going to seal it so that we could use the sealant will help the clear casting epoxy stay in here and not leak onto other parts of the base. And we're going to paint it before we do any of the clear casting though. Clear cast water effect. So I'm going to get started on the sanding, and I'll show you the results after. Alright, so we got them all sanded down. Got the excess sanded off there and smoothed everything on the edges. I also smoothed out the banks and little bits that were sticking up at odd angles and stuff. Looks much nicer and much smoother. There was a few cracks in here that were a little large and might have let the resin seep into the rest of the base, and I didn't want that, so I used some liquid green stuff to patch those up. There we go. And then of course these guys, same thing. You can see here too, I carved a little channel here to just look like a little smaller creek or runoff joining the main river. Yeah. Same kind of thing here. Alright, now the next step is to go prime these guys. I've got to prime them, and once that dries, I'm going to seal them with gloss. Make sure to use gloss, it'll seal them much better, and you can paint right over this, don't worry. But this will keep the help keep the epoxy in place and make a nice, firm, hard base for you to work on and work with. Keep everything from cracking too. Alright, so we've primed and clear coated. Came out looking really nice. Nice and smooth. A nice, firm, hard work surface that'll keep it from cracking and be really strong to support the model. This one came out really good too. Footprint's nice and hard, and not gonna go chipping or anything. And of course the little guys came out really good too. So what we're gonna do in the next step is we are gonna hit it with a thin layer of texture paint. Nice dirt texture. It adds a little bit more strength to the base, as well as a really nice texture, and gives it a really nice look. So that'll be the next step. We're going to go ahead and hit that with it right now. I don't want that texture on the rocks that I've made, so I'm just going to put a little bit of blue tape around the rocks to keep them from getting that texture appearance. Alright, so we've got them covered with the blue tape now, so that the texture paint doesn't get onto the rocks. Now, you can see it doesn't have to be perfect or exact. Again, these are outdoors bases. It's much better if they look a little more natural, so everything's not exact perfect. It actually looks real nice in the end. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and ready to go ahead and hit it with the texture paint. Alright, so we're finished with the texture coat. Came out really nice. Gives the whole base a very nice texture, except for the rocks that were masked off. That worked out really well. And the little guys, of course. See, that looks really nice. Got some nice definition going there. Of course, these guys over here. Alright, so the next step will be to paint the channels where the water is going to go with Strickland mud. It's a really nice texture paint I like using. It makes it give it a nice wet, muddy look to it, and you can make a kind of a chunky effect, and it'll actually look like a nice riverbed. And then we're going to go over the tops with Steel Legion Drab and the edges, and then I'm going to do the rocks in Dawnstone. And after that's all dry, we'll get started on the flocking. But I'll show you what it looks like when those 3 paints are applied. Alright, so we've got these painted up. Steel Legion Drab, Strickland Mud, and Dawnstone. Looking pretty good so far. And of course these guys painted up the same way. And now what I'm going to start doing is using Elmer's glue and painting on the dirt flock. And I'm only going to be applying the dirt flock to the areas with the Steel Legion Drab. And once the dirt flock is dried on, I'm going to hit all the base with Agrax Earthshade Wash, except the rock, which is going to get Newland Shade Wash, which that Newland Shade looks really good on that Dawnstone. Just totally completes the look of it, looking like a boulder. And then after that dries, go and make some vegetation patches with green flock. And then I also have some plants, little grass beds I'm going to put on there later. But first, we're going to get started with the dirt flock. Alright, so we got the flocking done for the dirt. Starting to look really sharp here. And of course I just applied that with Elmer's glue and just a regular brush. And little guys. Same thing. So the next step will be coating the base, minus the rocks, in Agrax Earthshade. That'll darken up the dirt really nicely, help it blend with the Strickland mud, and give some definition and detail to the different little clumps here on the Strickland mud as well. So we'll go ahead and get started on that, and I'll show you a shot of that when that's ready. Alright, so we got the Agrax Earthshade applied to the dirt flock on there. Came out real nice. And I got the Newland oil on the rock too. You can see the shading going on there. It looks a little shiny right now because I just put the Newland oil on there. It hasn't quite dried yet, so it's a little shinier than it ought to be. But everything else blends real nice. Real nice colors together. Same for these guys. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to add patches of green flock for grass and vegetation. And then we're going to add some jungle grass, little tufts, to the vegetation on the dirt patches up on top. And in the water, I'm going to put some of these dry reed looking grasses. Alright, get started on that. I'll show you a shot of that. Alright, so we got everything green flocked, and I got the vegetation, little bushes on there. It's coming together really nicely. I even added a little log for scenic effect here across the base there. These guys came out real well too. Alright, so next step is, some of these bases I'm not going to do this step right away with. It's going to be easy cast. This stuff here comes in 2 little balls you mix together. I got 2 measuring cups for it. And it says to mix for 5 minutes. Don't think, oh, it's been 2 minutes, I'm tired of stirring. It looks like it's mixed already, I'm going to stop. You will ruin your base. It will not dry fully. Don't rush this step. Mix it for the 5 minutes. Hell, go for 6 minutes. You need to mix it non-stop. Don't slack off on this step. This is the one step, if you screw up, it'll ruin your base. Make sure you mix this stuff exactly like it says to. 5 minutes at least. And use equal parts. That's why I have these little measuring cups. And I'm going to pour it into this base right now to show you how it's done. But I'm not going to do some of these bases because the models I'm going to have standing in the water, I need to have them glued to the base before I put the water. So I'll hold off on those ones later. But I've already stirred this one before I started shooting for 6 minutes. So we're going to get this starting to pour now. Alright. And you want to do less to start off with. You can always add more, but if you add too much, you can't do anything to fix it. And give it a moment to settle into the cracks. Don't rush and pour a whole lot. You might not know how much you've actually poured just yet. And you don't want to go too high either. You go too high, it'll start creeping up on the sides that we've built up and invade the rest of the base. I'm just gonna add a teeny bit more. And that should be plenty. There we go. It is ready. I'm gonna let that dry overnight. It says it takes 6 to 8 hours to cure. The last time I made a batch of this stuff, though, it took about 10. So we're gonna give that till tomorrow. There we go. And I'm gonna go ahead and do this one too. I'm gonna be a little bit careful not to pour it on the log. Don't want it to leave a glaze on top of it. Just tilt the base slightly, get it to spread. Alright, I was careful not to add too much to this particular base because I did make the sides a little shallower on this one and I didn't want it to creep up onto the sides of the base. There we go. I'm gonna let these dry overnight and they're gonna come out looking fantastic. And again, this brand, EasyCast, is the one I'd recommend going with. It's $13, $14 for this, and you get these 2 bottles. You have tons of this stuff. I've made 3 of these mixtures already, and look, it's still only to here. So yeah, this stuff goes a long way for 14 bucks. I tried silk water effects before, the floral kind, florists use for fake flowers. It did not turn out well. It gummed up my bases. I ended up ruining like $30 worth of bases and materials, and that's why I'm actually doing these again right now. Alright, so I'll show you the finished product tomorrow. Alright, so the resin hardened very nicely. Came out real well. Now, you could leave it like this, which I think the water looks a little too perfectly still. So what I like to do is I take some gloss varnish and just a brush and paint ripples. And you can see it's a little milky because it's not dry yet, but some of the strokes, as you can see, are starting to dry and they're going very clear. And the effect is, when it's done, it looks like ripples in the water, which is more natural. So I just try to follow the bank and then the obstructions and the log to make the ripples look natural. And I think that gives it a much better look. But there you go. Very beautiful bases, very simple to make. And you can see where I made the impressions for this guy, how he lines up here. I'm gonna have him walking. See? Got him on there, and I have him stepping on the rock, or I could have him matching up with every footprint. I think it looks a little better though, like he's walking and stepping on there. And I got 3 of these guys I gotta put together now. But I was very excited to make these bases for him. Very fun project. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments.